After 3 wonderful days in Corbett National Park, we're now off to see what we can find of Jim Corbett's life in Nainital and Kaladhungi, the 2 places that were central to his life. They were what made him, and it was where he had his summer and winter homes. Jim, a second-generation Indian of British descent, is the man the Indian government named Corbett National Park in his honour. This was in 1957, 2 years after his death and 9 years after India's independence. We say goodbye to the rest of the group as we join our car and driver to head off to Nainital.
Seatbelt.
Yeah, get my seatbelt on.
Yes.
Ooh, watch the cow.
Cow.
Yeah, he's saying. So, Fame, to Nainital, how long? How many hours?
About 2 hours.
Yeah, 2 hours. So where are we? Well, we're talking about India, and we're talking about this area of India. Well, Delhi is here on the left-hand side, and I've used this version of Google because it shows quite clearly the plains of India and the foothills of the Himalayas. Corbett National Park is where we've just been staying, and we had a wonderful few days there. And what we're going to do now is travel from Ramnaga along the edge of the plains to Kaladhungi, where Corbett had a winter home, because up in Nainital, where we're going to now, it could be covered in the snow over the winter months. And what I'll do is just trace our journey as we go along. This is an area that Corbett himself would have known very well. It's about 50 miles, I think. It is 75 years since Jim and his sister Maggie left. What can we find? Our tour organiser, Sharad Vats of Nature Safaris, was so pleased to know of my interest and lifelong love of Jim Corbett and his books. Sharad kindly helped to organise our guides. The first major town we come to is Ramnagar, a town which Jim would have known well. In his account of the Mahan man-eater, he tells us, when passing through Ramnagar, I had asked the Talisad to purchase 2 male buffaloes for me and to send them to Mohan, where my men would take them over. I wonder how much the town has changed in the last 75 years. Well, we've done 1 kilometre, Nainital 61, Kaladhungi. We set off not quite sure what to expect. While I have read Jim Corbett's books repeatedly throughout my life, the place names did not mean an awful lot to me. So I now hope to add the physical presence of the towns, villages, landscape and homes that I have only known through Jim's books. Hope you enjoy this too.
Kapka.
Kapka.
Yes.
So where are we? Well, we've left Ramnagar, and I think this is the water course we're just crossing here. The driver's given us a name. I can't see what it's actually called. So we're now driving along here to Kaladhungi. Nainital, 51 kilometres. The roads are very quiet. There's a rural feel about it all. I want to share 1 or 2 images on the way to Kaladhungi to give you an idea of the landscape and scenes. I'm sure Jim would have been very familiar with this road 75 years ago. I think these are teak trees. Yeah, the size of the leaves. And teak grow lower down. Good road. Nainital, 37 miles. Sorry, 37 kilometers, yeah. Old Guerney. So this is us heading up into the hills now. to Nainital. So what we've done now is driven along here, looked at some of the flat fields of grain, and we've come here to Kaladhungi, and what we're now going to do, and you can see the road zigzagging up to Nainital. As I've said, I've never been to this area before, and it's all new. I'm not quite sure what to expect. I know it's hilly, but how hilly is it going to be? And what is the vegetation like? And will it all be cut down and full of people, or so? All to come ahead of us. Monkey bridge. For safe crossing of monkeys. Brilliant. What I didn't even start to appreciate was how steep it would all be. If one thinks it's 62 kilometers or 39 miles from Ramnaga to Nainital, or half that distance from the plains of Kaladhungi as we turn up to the hills, it's no distance at all. But when you add the very steep terrain, the road, which is in excellent condition, but to climb the hills to Nainital requires an awful lot of slow bends.
Sir, are you going first time Nainital?
Yeah, first time. Only water, is it?
First of all, the nimbu pani, water.
Water.
Small spicy.
A little bit spicy, is it?
Yeah, small
Wow.
spicy.
Yeah.
Nimbu pani and masala.
Masala in the water.
Yes.
Wow.
Go check.
No, thank you. Okay, we're climbing up. You can see the plains down below us. Very quickly we've got up to a reasonable height. Yeah. Very sheer sides. Yeah, the plains up. We've climbed up very quickly.
Other views are Corbett. Who are only Corbett.
Oh, Corbett, is it?
Yeah, other view.
Looking out towards Corbett. Wow. There it is again. Wow, what incredible forest, isn't it? Oh, just 100% forest. I also hadn't appreciated the dense forest. Looking down on the area from Google Earth, one just doesn't get an idea of how incredible it all is. The changes of landscape from the plains and even from Corbett National Park is nothing but spectacular. I read somewhere that Jim Corbett used to walk from Kaladhungi to Nainital for morning meetings, then back again at the end of the day. It just makes me realise how very fit he must have been. Jim's route from Kaladhungi, his winter home, I'm sure wouldn't have followed the road, but my guess is he'd follow along this valley here, all the way up, and then maybe through the bottom of Nainital, and something like that, a route that the cars can't do today. You're still climbing all the way up? We stop to take in the view. Wow, what a view. And we've just come up from down here along this route here.
Is this all Corbett?
Department.
Forest Department, is it?
Yes, the Corbett.
And Corbett.
Corbett,
Wafi route.
yeah, that's the road we came up, isn't it? Along there. Fantastic. It is amazing, yeah, absolutely amazing. On the lower slopes of the drive, we only saw the occasional stalls offering spiced water, as our driver described to us. We start to see human habitation once the landscape starts to level off. Along with this, the vegetation changed, and for the first time we see fir trees. Our driver, ever attentive to our needs, stopped at a spot that he knew would give us an excellent view of the plains below. It really made us appreciate from where we had come, and putting it into the Jim Corbett context, sure, the landscape and terrain between Jim's two homes of Nainital and Kaladhungi couldn't be better illustrated. Some height, the plains right down below. We've still got some distance to go. Once we're around this mountain, we'll get to Nainital. Kumaon University, okay. We arrive at Nainital. I just had not anticipated the sheer scale of the hills, how vertical they were, even here in Nainital. Nothing had prepared me for this. I just find it quite difficult to comprehend and get it all into my mind. We're now looking for our guide who's meant to be meeting us at this location. The guide here?
Yes.
Do you want to get in the back, James, or do you want the guide?
Do we walk or you call the guide? Our guide joined us. It turned out he doesn't know any English either, even less than our driver, and we had absolutely zero Hindi, or for that matter any other Indian language. One thing I knew was that he would be very well briefed by Sharad Vats and his team at Nature Safaris. This fact turned out to be 100% accurate, as we were to find out.
Jim Corbett's, see, it says here, Gurney House.
Jim Corbett's Gurney House, okay.
If you go this way now.
Okay,
There it is.
so we're going to Gurney House. Jim's parents came to Nainital in 1862. Go and look out the window there. When Jim's father was appointed postmaster of Nainital.
Did you get back up here again? It's a long way.
On the 25th of July 1875, Jim Corbett was born here. 13 years later, he was his mother's 12th child. Less than 2 months later, a massive landslide in Nainital destroyed the pilgrim temple dedicated to Naravani or Nani Devi, and it hurled the temple bell to the opposite side of the valley where the new temple stands to this day. The landslide also killed 151 people. It had been caused by 33 inches of rainfall, over 20 inches of which fell in 40 hours. Unbelievable, so another car just squeezes in.
Doesn't even wait. What's wrong?
उसको वहाँ पीछे रोकना था ना सर चलो एक मिनट रुक जाओ चलो 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 शीशा बंद करो अब ऐसे ले लो
He's got to try and squash up here. So. Come back down this way.
From where the Corbett family lived, they could see the massive scar on the hillside opposite, and the devastation. Everyone feared that their homes too would be toppled in the valley below. By chance, 4 years before this, Jim's parents had bought a building plot on the slopes facing the landslide. This was to become Gurney House, the Corbett's home, where Jim and his sister Maggie lived for almost all their lives. Oh, Gurney House.
Just what this is.
Our guide's a nice fit old man, he's jogging down the road. I believe all the property to the right behind the wall is Gurney House, quite a large area. My guess is it is exactly the same size as it was when the Corbetts left 75 years ago. Jim and Maggie's old home is still very much loved and cared for by its new owners. This I am certain would make Jim very pleased. This is where Jim Corbett lived, and it is a private residence and it should be respected as such, but what a lovely location, hidden right up in the backwaters of Nainital. You just walk around? Yeah.
house is closed
Yeah, that's fine. No problem. Even just look outside.
No, sir.
Yeah, we'll look outside. Thank you. No, just look outside. Here, and look back. This is Gurney House the Corbett family used to live in. This is also where Jim grew up. He was looked after by an ayah or nanny. He grew up speaking 2 local languages as well as Hindi, which he learnt from the household servants. This was not uncommon at the time. I grew up on a farm in Kenya speaking both Swahili and English. Jim also learnt the local customs, traditions, religion and superstitions from the servants. These were to be very useful to him throughout his life. It is said he was far more sympathetic to Hinduism than he ever was to Christianity. It's quite cool, yeah. Yeah. No wonder they came up here in the summer. Yeah, one picture there?
I'll do another one.
Yeah,
Yep, okay, I'll do it too.
thank you. Okay, yeah, let's go. Thank you very much. Jello. The lake down below there. Our next stop is St. John in the Wilderness, one of the Nainital's oldest buildings. Its location was approved by Bishop Daniel Wilson way back in 1844. Here's the church. The church stands on a wooded hillock above the lake, behind the bazaar, and surrounded by a horseshoe of steep mountains that protect the town. It is here that Jim Corbett's father was buried in 1881. He was 58 years old when he died. Jim was only 6. He was laid to rest on one of the upper terraces near to the public entrance. Jim's father was a prominent member of Nainital's council. It is he who recognised the town's need for a proper sewage system, which the town enjoys to this day. He had also promoted a clean water drainage system, but was unsuccessful in persuading his fellow council members to support it. Jim's mother, Mary Corbett, lived until she was nearly 90, and she died 43 years after her husband in 1924. She was buried next to him. She was one of the oldest European inhabitants of the town, holding a much respected position in the local society. Her funeral was reported to be a grand affair. It's quite a church. Leaving the church, we wonder what is next.
Left side, High Court. High
Oh,
Court
it's the
is
High
an-
Court. Okay.
The left side.
On the
Church
left.
branch. Church branch, High Court.
Okay,
Church branch and
there's the High Court.
Oh, look at that.
Okay, very smart. Google tells me the High Court was built in 1900. I hasten to add I'm unaware of any Corbetts being involved with the courts. We find ourselves back where we started. There seems to be a purpose, even if we don't understand the plan, and have no doubt it'll work out.
Traffic jam.
We're now going into a little car because the other car's too big. Thank you.
What's the driver now?
चलो मैडम अच्छा शादी
My hat.
यहीं ले आऊंगा हाँ घुमा फिरा
So going on the other side, we've gone up to the top and we seem to be going round. I thought it's worth just stopping for a moment to try and remind ourselves exactly where we are and put it into context. We've come up this squiggly road all the way up here and we picked up our guide, I believe, in this location. And what we then did, we went off to Guerney House, which I think's along here. I don't exactly know where it is on the map. Jim Corbett grew up here and he said that he hunted in the forests or got to know the animals and wildlife in the forest, which presumably were at the back here. And we then went to St. John's Western Church, which I think is located here. We then came back to where we picked up the guide and we swapped cars to a smaller car. And what we're now doing is we're heading off, as I understand it, and the shots I'll show you along the top here. Occasionally we get glimpses down the bottom and we'll come round and I believe to this viewpoint and we'll get a very good view down here. We then go to Jim Corbett's school, which I think is here, and it's now called the Burla Vidya Mandir school or college. And I think we stop here and you'll see the shots there. We then head on down and we stop at a post office somewhere around here, which our guide, I think, indicates it was run by Jim's father and brother. And then we come along the bottom. You'll see us driving along the lakeside. We'll then see the Ma Naina Devi temple in the distance as we drive around here, the bazaar, and we'll come back up and we get back into our car and say cheerio, and we drive all the way back down again. As I mentioned, this top route gives us some spectacular views looking between the trees of the valley below and all the houses, and eventually we'll catch some glimpses of the lake as well. Okay, and that's what I find amazing is how sheer these sides are. Incredibly steep. Oh,
Nanny Lake?
Yeah, Nanny Lake. Yeah.
Nanny Lake?
Jim Corbett was very critical of deforestation policies in India at the time, complaining when native trees were felled, they were not being replaced. He could not change government policy, but at a local level, he was able to protect Nainital from goats, who were stripping bare the low bush cover that hid and protected other animals such as barking or muntjac deer. Goats were used as pack animals to carry goods as well as being eaten. Jim enforced the licensing of goats, which in turn controlled the numbers of goats, which resulted in protection of the vegetation for the wildlife.
Telescope is point, tracking point.
Yeah. Yeah, very.
अभी हम नीचे जाएंगे, ठीक है?
I wanted to know more of the history of Nainital before the arrival of the Europeans. I found a very good website, nainital.nic.in. It's excellent if you're ever thinking of going to Nainital. It tells me Nainital has very important mythical significance. I've already mentioned the temple, which is a place of pilgrimage, but why? It is said the lake, which is eye-shaped, formed as a result of the left eye, hence the word Nan, fell when Lord Shiva carried the charred body of Sati, hence its name Nana, and Tal meaning lake. This is the lake where Jim Corbett lived. In the hills above it. His father was a postmaster here and his mother ran a bed and breakfast accommodation place. But what a magnificent place this is. The first European to arrive was Mr. Trail, who discovered the beautiful secret valley, but did not popularize it out of respect for the religious sanctity of the place. That was way back in 1817. But 20-odd years later, by the 1840s, it had become a popular tourist resort where the British escaped the heat of the plains during the summer months. The bits in the water are boats, pleasure boats. So how high is it? Well, its highest peak is 2,600 meters above sea level, or 8,600 feet. The lake itself is 700 meters lower than that, or 6,400 feet. Jim Corbett's winter home at Kaladhungi, which is down on the plains, is just 514 meters, or 1,700 feet above sea level, a drop of more than 4,500 feet, or 1,400 meters from Nainital Lake, and hence the very different atmosphere you get here. Just to give you an idea of how steep this is, just watch that kid going down the hill. Okay.
गाड़ी में ही अब यूं घुमाना है टेंशन मत लीजिए आप पैसा दिया है आप
Here's the courthouse and everything else down below. We could now see why the guide got us to change cars. These streets are so narrow, but it's lovely to get a glimpse of Nainital life away from the middle of the busy town. think this is where Corbett School was, but we're not allowed in there. Senior houses, junior houses. Jim went to school in the 1880s. His school was called Oak Openings, possibly on the account of its stunning location at 7,500 feet or 2,300 meters, which provided panoramic views of the town. And the lake is just down here now. And it is said the distant plains below, even though we can't actually see them from where we are. The building where Jim attended school is said to still be there, in the much expanded school, located close to the school buildings. The school was run by an ex-military man known as the captain, not uncommon in those days. He was known as ruthless and cruel in his treatment of his 70 pupils. The pupils nicknamed him Dead-Eyed Dick on account of his accuracy with a cane on their backsides and as a marksman with his rifle. As with other schools of the time, the school had an army cadet corps in which Captain or Dead-Eyed Dick took great pride. When Lord Roberts, or later Field Marshal Earl Roberts, visited the school, Jim was singled out to give a shooting display on the rifle range. At the time, Jim was the school's youngest pupil. It was a measure of what he was to become known as later in life, as a shikari or an expert hunter. In 1858, Jim's father joined the government-run civilian post office service after leaving the army with a small pension. 4 years later, in 1862, he was sent to Nainital.
नैनीताल का head.
This is 20 years after the secret valley of Nainital was first visited by Europeans. It now had a flourishing resident European community. I don't actually think this is the post office Jim's father was the postmaster of. We're now walking up to the post office. I believe that was near the Bazaar, which we'll pass shortly. Jim's older brother Tom joined the post office service, working under his father as a junior. In time, he too would become postmaster of Nainital. Certainly has a commanding spot, looking down. Although of British ancestry, the first and second generations of Indian-born family saw themselves very much of Indian and India as their country. It is something I too can identify with as a second generation of British culture in East Africa. I grew up like so many others of British descent, seeing East Africa and Kenya as our countries. It was to change for the Corbetts, as indeed it was for us. I'll talk a bit more about that later when we visit Kaladhungi in my next video. You can hear the temple bell. As we head down to the lake, it gives me the opportunity to talk about Jim's conservation measures here. Jim was keen to protect wildlife wherever he could in Nainital. In 1923, when he was a senior vice chair of the Nainital Municipal Board, he was able to pass a motion prohibiting night fishing for mahseer on Nainital Lake. The purpose behind that was to conserve stocks. He also restricted fishing on certain banks of the lake on the grounds of protecting the breeding. He also tried unsuccessfully to get the whole of Nainital and the surrounding area designated as a bird sanctuary. Having just talked about Jim's attempt to create Nainital into a bird sanctuary, I thought you might find it interesting to hear what Raymond, our excellent Gujar guide for vehicle number 1, told us about Nainital's wildlife.
Let's go. You've been Nainital? You've been
Many times I've been.
Oh, you're right.
Many times I've been. Nainital is now very far for us because like 2-hour drive from here to Nainital.
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have used to go in the winter time for birding because many people come, they visit in Corbett, see a tiger and birding in the Corbett, and they want to do birding in Pangot and Nainital, Satal. This is a very good area for bird watching, ultimate area for bird watching. All the rare bird you can see near the Nainital and Pangot and Satal, because from the high altitude birds come down, and then that's why people are going for bird watching.
Tiger up there. There must
Leopard
be.
sighting is there. Leopard is tiger is very high for the tiger. Tiger cannot survive on that place, and very less prey for tiger. except human beings.
A great sense of humour. Back to our tour.
Okay, that's the market.
Market.
Okay, thank you. सामने नैना देवी टेम्पल गुरुद्वारा. Oh yeah. There's the temple.
Yeah.
ये पंप हाउस.
Pump house.
Pump house.
पानी जल.
Okay.
ब्रिटिश अंग्रेजों का
I always see.
पंप हाउस.
For the water.
पानी.
Yeah, pani.
water supply.
Yeah.
ये पूरा. ब्रिटिश टाइम.
Okay.
Now it's time for our goodbyes. Our guide was brilliant. He couldn't have done more. He made the very best of the short time we had to see Jim's Nainital.
Thank you.
We leave very much enriched. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.